Welcome back. I'm Ian Masters, and this is Background Briefing, available 24/7 at backgroundbriefing.org. And joining us now is James Risen, the Senior National Security Correspondent at The Intercept and a former investigative journalist with The New York Times and the author of State of War and Pay Any Price, Greed, Power, and Endless War. He won the Pulitzer Prize for his stories about warrantless wiretaps by the NSA, and in 2007 he was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and is currently the director of the Press Freedom Defense Fund, which has provided financial assistance for Maria Ressa's legal defense in the Philippines. And his latest article at The Intercept is, Will the GOP's Trumpist wing persist in its embrace of Putin? Welcome to Background Briefing, James Risen.
Thanks for having me.
So thanks for joining us. And there's clearly a split in the GOP and in their right-wing media echo chamber. They seem to be torn between those who hate Putin and those who, like the current leader of the GOP, Donald Trump, love Putin. So how much do you think this war, this actually, which I think could be described as the murder in plain sight, or the attempted murder in plain sight of a country and its people, how much do you think it's affecting the balance between those who hate Putin and those who love Putin in the GOP?
Well, that's an excellent question. I think, as far as I can tell, most of them now are denouncing the invasion, but that's very different from admitting that they've been wrong about Putin and about authoritarianism. They've been fairly narrow for the most part in what they've been saying in the last few days. And if you look back, what they were really attracted to about Putin was a mythology that they had built up around him, which is really kind of a fantasy that they built up, that he was a guardian of Western civilization, and he was a Christian nationalist who had brought back churches in Russia, who cracked down on gays, and who was the great world leader against the woke left. And that was really the engine that drove their support for Putin. And it was all this myth that they had built up about him. They didn't care that he was a dictator. In fact, they kind of liked it. And I think it's similar to their attraction to Viktor Orban in Hungary, who they are, CPAC, the big conservative organization, is still planning a big conference in Hungary next month, or I guess this month, just because they are so attracted to Orban's form of autocracy and his attacks on the press and immigrants and things like that. So I don't believe they've changed their fundamental views of what autocracy, how seductive autocracy could be in their long-term goal of killing the left, of destroying any attempt to increase tolerance in America. And so I think it's still a dangerous virus on the right, and I don't think it's been extinguished by the invasion. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out in among more mainstream Republicans, because, as you know, most Republicans, even the conventional ones, have mostly refused to ever disassociate themselves with Trump. And as a result, they keep ignoring him, and then they get overwhelmed by him. And so it's a very dangerous situation in the Republican Party, I think.
But surely, James Risen, it shouldn't be a surprise that right-wingers in America and around the world like Putin, because he's not a right-winger, he's a far right-winger. If anything, he's a fascist. What I find extraordinary, Jim, is that people on the left in this country don't seem to see who he really is. I mean, I don't know whether they got they're still thinking of somehow he's a leftist. I mean, I don't get it. I mean, I don't understand why.
You mean like some of the really extreme leftists?
No, I mean, I'd say the editors of those who make apologies for him, like the editors of The Nation and Matt Taibbi and others.
Yeah, I would call them extreme leftists. I wouldn't even call them leftists. I'd call them, I actually think they're just pro-Trump. I mean, I don't think it's that hard to understand. I think they're people who, there's people who call themselves leftists who are actually just right-wing, pro-Trumpers, I think. I think that, it's a distinction. The distinction between them and the right wing is a distinction without a difference.
So it should be obvious, though, surely, that Trump's GOP and Putin's united Russia are very, very much alike. First of all, their primary purpose and their number one priority is to take care of oligarchs. They're also into trolling, they're into culture wars, and they're into rewriting history. I mean, the list goes on. The comparisons are so real. I just don't understand why the Democrats can't sort of point this out.
Yeah, I think it's been a real problem to hold Trump and his ilk accountable for everything they've said and done. And I blame social media for a lot of that. I think that it's been very, the inundation of disinformation and lies on, all forms of social media has had a very toxic effect. I think we were very lucky that Trump lost in 2020. And I think the danger is that, the January 6th was, in historical terms, could be like the beer hall putsch for Hitler, something that he's able to come back from.
Well, he's dodged so many bullets. Everybody keeps, I don't know how much it's wishful thinking, that they keep thinking that finally this man has been one step ahead of the sheriff is going to be nailed.
Right.
Now we're learning that the new DA in Manhattan has pretty much dropped the case, it seems, against him, which is obviously requires some investigation as to his motives.
Right.
Do you think that what's happening now, though, in Ukraine, I mean, the fact that Trump still praises Putin, and
I know, it's just unbelievable. I think that, I think there's more to come about Trump's relationship with Russia and Putin. I think this hopefully it will shake loose more information. I would not be surprised if we see more defections out of the Russian government, because Putin's government has become, there used to be kind of a sense that it was a regime, and now it's just a one-man strong man. And I think that may lead a bunch of people in the Russian government to defect. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some key defections that bring us more information.
No, indeed, we were discussing that in the segment before you came on, James. And of course, one indicator of that is that these Chechen hit teams that, we know that the Chechen hit teams are Putin's favorite instruments of political assassination. They killed Nemtsov and Anna Politkovskaya and others, and they were rounded up and killed by the Ukrainians because they were sent into Kyiv to kill Zelensky.
Right.
But the tip-off came from Russia's intelligence service, the FSB. Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of Russian intelligence officers serving overseas who I would bet that the agency, the CIA, is pitching right now to either defect or begin to work for them in place. That would be my guess. And I think I think today I saw that one of the top Russian officials at the World Bank quit today. So I would expect to see some, hopefully, I think Putin has been very secretive about his money and finances. But I think this is so unpopular within the Russian leadership that I think you'll see some cracks. I don't think anybody will challenge his power, but I think people will leave.
Well, in our first segment today, we were looking into the possibility that Putin is mentally ill. I mean, and that shouldn't come as too much of a surprise. The former president of the United States, Donald Trump, is manifestly mentally ill. And even the Russians, by the way, apparently, according to British intelligence, the leaks from the National Security Council meeting when they decided to intervene on Trump's part in 2016 and help elect him and hurt Hillary Clinton. Apparently, they admitted or understood that Trump was mentally ill and therefore was very susceptible to their blandishments.
Yeah. No, I think that's the big question to me is he so unbalanced that he might start a nuclear war? That's obviously the big question. And all I can say is I hope not. But everything I know about it is that he's had a long-standing, there's a famous story I think I mentioned in my piece about how humiliated he felt when the Berlin Wall fell, and that his humiliation has never really left him, and that he sees himself as rebuilding a Russian empire. And, Ukraine is obviously the most independent part of the former Soviet, of the former Soviet Union, except of course for the Baltic states, which are all now members of NATO. And that would be if he stays in power and wins in Ukraine, I think there'll be a major border crisis between NATO and Russia over the Baltics.
Well, that is obviously what strategists fear that will be his next step, but I'm not sure he's going to get out of this one, even alive, maybe. I mean, this seems to be going from bad to worse, even though the military power is so overwhelming.
Well,
he's starting to slaughter civilians in huge numbers.
The thing that's been surprising to me is how incompetent the Russian military has been. And I think this is actually probably an intelligence goldmine for NATO and for the U.S. military to see this, the Russian army in action on a large scale, because we haven't seen a large-scale Russian military operation since World War II, really. And so it's pretty if you're a Russian, it's pretty depressing how bad they are, how incompetent and just horrible at operations. And it's good for the West. So,
right, but wouldn't it be, I know it's a bit of a stretch, but say we had a crazy president, and we just had one, Donald Trump, who decided to invade Canada. I don't think the U.S. military would be behaving any differently than the Russians are. They're fighting their brothers, and they're thinking, "What the hell are we doing?" They've been told a bunch of lies.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, it's I remember when right before Trump was elected, I remember saying to somebody, a friend of mine, that to me the best case scenario would be that Trump would just be like Berlusconi, kind of a crook and a thief who would loot the government. And the worst case scenario would be he would be like Hitler and start a nuclear war. And I still believe we got closer to the best case scenario than the worst case. I think Trump was corrupt loser and thief who didn't start a nuclear war. But I think if he comes back with a crazy Putin and a crazy Trump, both in place at the same time, all bets are off about whether we'd have another nuclear war.
Two sick men driven by vengeance. I thank you for joining us, James Risa.
Sure. Yeah, it's pretty depressing.
Yeah, it is. But I think it's important to be realistic about who these people are, and particularly what kind of mental state they have. And again, I've been speaking with James Risen, the Senior National Security Correspondent at The Intercept and a former investigative journalist with the New York Times, and the author of the New York Times bestseller, State of War and Pay Any Price, Greed, Power, and Endless War. In 2006, he won the Pulitzer Prize for his stories about warrantless wiretapping by the NSA, and in 2007, he was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and he's currently the director of the Press Freedom Defense Fund, which has provided financial assistance for Maria Ressa's legal defense in the Philippines. And his latest article at The Intercept is, Will the GOP's Trumpist wing persist in its embrace of Putin? This has been Background Briefing. I'm Ian Masters, and I'd like to thank producer Graham Fitzgibbon. And to help us sustain this program into the future and assure it remains free to all, please take a moment to support us by going to backgroundbriefing.org/donate or publictruthmedia.org, where you will find our non-profit Public Truth Media Foundation, where your tax-deductible donations, large and small, keep us broadcasting. And if you missed any of today's program and would like to explore our vast archives, you can find us at backgroundbriefing.org, where we'll include extended interviews searchable by topic, and have made it easy for you to sign up for daily email updates that provide links to resources, articles, and books discussed on the program. Also, you can find links there to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we also encourage your ratings and reviews on these platforms. Find us on Twitter and Facebook at Ian Masters Media, and please do help us reach more listeners by sharing this program with friends, family, and colleagues. And I'll be back again tomorrow with another Background Briefing at backgroundbriefing.org. Bye for now.
The guy that lived next door in 305 took the kids to the park and disappeared by 9:30. Who will ever know how much she loved them so? That dark night alone in America. A quiet voice was singing something to me, an angel song about the home of the brave in this land here under the creek. One time, one night in America. A teacher and the other became a car. A car skidded into the rain, making the last little one to say, one more light goes out in America. A young girl tosses a coin in the wishing well. She hopes for a heaven while for her there's just this hell. She gave away a life to become somebody's wife. Another wish and